Imagine your Dubai or Doha connection cancelled mid-journey, or even scarier, you're cruising at flight level 380, but your GPS says you're circling over a desert. That's what's happening now. Hi, pal.
Hey, cuz.
Do you like my little attention grabber there? Did it work for you?
On point, huh? But that was definitely the question that was being asked in a couple of flight decks around the world earlier this week.
Yeah. Today we're diving into two critical intertwined aviation challenges, the direct impact of the Middle East conflict and the invisible electronic warfare of GNSS jamming and spoofing that is affecting civil aviation. Two big points, and obviously earlier on in the week, as you alluded to there, it's weird, the time we're in, that we can actually be so casual about, oh, there's a war going on. It's like, it's a little bit blasé about the fact that it's a rather major event that is happening. And I don't know, it's almost like we've become numbed to these things. The conflict in Ukraine has been going on for such a long time. It's just a part of life. And airspaces being closed are just a part of being an airline pilot and having to deal with these things that weren't a case a few years ago. But yep, there is a war going on. There are some rather serious bombs that have been dropped. And there's, of course, some major aviation angle to it that we're going to try and speak about today.
Yeah, crazy, isn't it? I mean, what the world has come to. And like you say, how mad is it that we've become sort of blasé to it? But was it Monday or Tuesday night this week where I think it was one of the first times in the last couple of weeks where I sort of started paying attention to really what was going on when my phone started blowing up with, hey, UAE airspace is closed and Doha is closing airspace. And you started seeing on the threads all the pictures of the flight radar images with aircraft turning around. And it was like, for a moment there, I almost thought, shucks, are we headed for like another 9/11 type thing now where things are just going to go absolutely chaotic?
Because that's what it looked like.
It felt like that for a second. It was mad. But yeah, fortunately, next morning we were woken up and they've sort of shaken hands by then.
Yeah.
But it's been very, very difficult to keep your finger on the pulse as to who's going to sort of just flare up next. It's kind of uneasy times, I suppose.
Yeah, it is. And mainstream media being what it is, you don't always trust what's in there these days, if anything. So you don't quite know the complexity of what's happening from a pilot point of view, from a crew point of view. You know, what sort of things are they dealing with? Let's maybe break it up. Let's start off with, you're a passenger now. You've en route for your Greek holiday, and you're stopping off in Dubai for a couple of hours and then jumping on a connection through to Athens. Yeah, that didn't happen. A lot of passengers got diverted to all sorts of strange places. Some of them strange, some of them not so much. But someone that I spoke to ended up in India.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they were in India and, of course, stuck on the plane because what the hell do you do with these packs? And I always got a bit of sympathy there for the skipper. You know, you're responsible for all these passengers and your crew, and now you're, what do we do next type of vibe. But yeah, from a passenger perspective, it's absolute chaos.
Really frustrating. I mean, if you've gone and forked out thousands now for this holiday that you've been looking forward to for months on end, and you're 3/4 of the way through your flight, because that was one of the things I did. I checked on Flight Radar 24, and I instantaneously went and saw, oh, there's a Emirates flight, 762 or something like that. Like, looks like they're going to have to divert. A shame, man. I mean, what happens to those passengers? And it's frustrating, man. You can understand if it's a technical thing, but now you're going to divert to somewhere where there's probably lots of other diversions occurring at the same time. So you're going to end up in a terminal, hot, sweaty, late at night, nowhere to go, pandemonium.
Traveling is not for sissies, and it's not the first time that I've said that on the show. It really isn't. And you know, traveling is such a wonderful thing. And once you're there, it's, you know, you're on holiday. But the journey, the flight, the at the airport is all kind of part of it. But you throw something like this in the mix, and that whole vibe changes, because now there's high anxiety. There's people fighting with people because, well, first of all, the whole thing happened because of a war situation. So you've got the two sides of the conflict there, and a lot of passengers have an opinion on what the Israelis should be doing, and the other passengers got an opinion on what the Iranians should be doing.
Yeah.
And it's a very volatile situation, but none more so than at the airports, because you've got people that are pissed off, that aren't where they want to be, and it's just not a nice situation. So sympathies to all the people that did get stranded, and by all evidence, it looks like everyone is kind of where they're supposed to be now.
Yeah.
I had a look on flight radar before the pod started. Things seem to be cruising along merrily. Question I ask, and you're probably not going to get an accurate answer from the news on this, but I wonder how long, and only the airlines would know, how long does it take for that little ripple to stop causing effects down the line? I mean, you can't tell me that Emirates and Qatar are back at 100%, because they're still dealing with issues caused by this thing. So this thing carries on and on and on for quite a while.
I think the ripple carries on for a good while. I mean, if you just think about an ordinary diversion based on what we normally know, is passengers had to get accommodated. Luggage was probably lost. You'd have to compensate passengers for all sorts of things, meal vouchers, return tickets, whatever the case may be, transport, and all of that. And then obviously the disruption to your schedule, cruise FDPs, the whole mix, man. The ripple takes a long time to...
Yeah, a good few months probably.
I'm sure.
And I remember, I might be totally wrong with this, maybe Elmac can let us know, but wasn't there like a rough figure, a normal diversion for a small domestic carrier in South Africa was close on like R1 million for the cost to an airline?
Yeah.
Something like it. I might be totally wrong. El would know probably better. But if you take all those diversions and you add that entire impact into, again, looking at it from a aviation industry business perspective, it's going to affect it. We reported on IATA's report 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
The McKinsey report came out, was very positive about all these things happening. But one of the things mentioned in both those reports was, of course, the conflict. And conflict is going to affect the entire industry going forward. But anyway, that's looking at it from a passenger perspective. Let's put ourselves in the flight deck now. And you're bombing along.
Don't use that. That's not the right...
You're flying along at 38,000 feet, and you pick up a message on your ACARS or through your communication there that, look, you can't carry on to your destination. This is the story. And now you've got to start making a plan. And your risk profile massively increases now, because it catches you off guard. You're flying along, and for the non-aviators listening, a diversion is actually quite a stressful thing to go through, because it's not a case of just pointing the aircraft in a new direction and off you go. The planning that takes place is pretty massive. And there's also a good chance that a lot of these aircraft didn't just divert to their standard alternates, because they may have been full. Yeah. There may have been other aircraft. So a very complex situation. And maybe, again, the listeners out there, the guys that are flying for these carriers, let us know, were you in the air at the time, and what decision did you make, and how easy was it to make a decision? The one thing we know with these big airlines like Qatar and Emirates is their procedures and the support that they have for something like this is massive. So they're so well drilled and trained to make the right decision, but you still have to go through that process to get the aircraft on the ground safely.
I'm glad you bring that up, because there was I saw a thread on one of the conversations there that night. There was a flight, I think, from Auckland to Doha that had been flying. It was a 16-hour flight or something like that, one of those ULRs. and they had to divert. And like you say, it's an instantaneous change, and it's a drastic change all at the same time, and you've got to deal with vast amounts of information coming in and make a decision as to, okay, where do we go now?
Yeah.
Because our planned alternate might not be available. And
that's where the teamwork stuff sort of really comes in. And it's one of the best things to watch a high-performing crew deal with a situation like that. And it's one of the best parts for me as a sim instructor, sitting back when you got a real high-quality crew that are working their way through a complex situation. And you know what's strange? If you've got I don't know if you've seen this with simulator training, but if you have a situation that leads to an obvious decision, like let's say you've got a baggage fire or something, and you got to get the aircraft on the ground safely and quickly, the crew tends to be pretty straightforward for competent crew because there's no decision to make. But it is a thing like this where you may not have even done this, you may not have practiced this in a simulator, you may not have thought about it too much, and now you've got to make a decision based on a whole bunch of external events. This isn't something happening to your airplane. This is something happening in the outside world on the ground. It's a political situation.
Yeah.
And you're going to have passengers on board from particular countries that might be involved in the actual war that's going on. It's incredibly complex.
Such a unique scenario to be faced with, I think, guys. And, the complexity of dealing with that, the amount of information, the things that you've got to process. Is there really a checklist for that? And I would almost think if it's handled well, it would be like watching a Formula One team or a pit crew putting things together properly. But, would there be a checklist for that kind of scenario?
I suppose, look, these airlines, the likes of Qatar and Emirates and that, and Etihad and all these Middle Eastern carriers, you know that their training is on point. And one thing that's pretty clear is the airlines are very good these days at doing training specific to that operation. So you can't tell me that this conversation hasn't popped up in training before, and the scenarios that have been spoken about or even demonstrated in a simulator haven't been played out.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that they have, and probably the most prepared crews for this were those airlines, because this war didn't just flare up overnight, did it? It's kind of been happening for a while.
Yeah, look, there's been I think they've been sniffing at the oil rig for quite a while at this. But
so I'm pretty sure that there would at least be, if not a possibly not an OEM type of checklist, but at least your airline would have some form of something to work with. Isn't that the most important thing in these situations? That as long as you've got some sort of protocol to work with, then you can fall back on it. Because if you try and do this off the top of your head and you're flying an airplane with a few hundred people in the back, it's not so easy to make that final decision, because you might just be missing one element, and that one element steers you off in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
I always ask the young first officers, I say, what do you think your role is as a first officer? And, support the captain and this and that. But I always think that the role of a first officer is to provide the captain with the correct information so the captain can make the correct decision, because that's ultimately what it's all about, making the correct decision. And I said your risk profile greatly goes up. Why? Because you're planning to go from A to B, and halfway or 3/4 of the way that plan changes, but not just your plan, everyone.
Yeah.
So everyone in the airspace is now doing the same thing. So now you got aircraft turning on airways, and some of them going back to departure aerodromes, some of them going to alternates. You got this whole, and I don't know, the ATC and that, I mean, they really do have their work cut out. We saw it on September 11, all those radar images of just the, all those aircraft in the air, and not so long later, they all safely on the ground. That's where, you got to put heavy respect on all the ATCs that basically work with the crew to get those aircraft on the ground safely. And that's like the epitome of high performance in aviation for me. When there's change like that they're able to adapt, and not just adapt, but do it in this incredibly safe and efficient way of just getting the aircraft on the ground safely.
In a massively dynamic environment.
Exactly.
I mean, just thinking about it off the top of your head, it's nighttime.
Yeah.
Probably a bit of weather being in Northern Hemisphere summer. There's closed airspace with dangerous equipment flying around. And then to add on to that, in that area as well, they would probably be dealing with GPS jamming issues, no doubt, I'm assuming.
Yeah. That's just the norm.
So, it just doesn't get any easier. It becomes a moving target of a situation of note.
And I wonder, we're speaking about it there, those aircraft all make their way, thankfully, onto the ground safely. But then it kind of becomes, what do we do now? The safety aspect is now sorted out. You're on the ground safe. But then there's a whole whack of things that need to happen for that plane to get refueled and back to their, some of those planes didn't just, take off again and go to where they were supposed to be going. There was all sorts of reroutes, and some passengers had to be picked up in other parts of the world. And this is, of course, why this thing rolls on. But to take your segue with the whole GPS and the spoofing, the reason that I wanted to bring this up today, I watched a YouTube video the other night. It was just a stock standard one of these videos. I like watching these ones where it's just a normal flight overnight, someone there sitting in the jump seat filming this whole thing happen. And it was an A350, such an awesome flight deck, a Scandinavian flight. And the captain was explaining, what's going to happen now, because the GPSs are going to click offline and they're going to use their IRSs, and it's not, he wasn't.
So they were anticipating.
They were anticipating it. So he wasn't phased about it at all. But he said, this has been happening now for ages. They're just very used to it. And he said, right, you're going to see all sorts of messages pop up, and so it's something that has been happening, but not something that's overly reported again in the mainstream media. And if you had to tell the passengers in the back that you realize that the pilots have lost their GPS capability, people don't even drive a 20-minute car drive anymore without having Google Maps on. So if you had to tell them that, look, the skipper in there's lost his Google Maps, there might be a bit of panic in the cabin. But this is still happening, and I just thought I would clarify it a little bit here, and maybe for the non-aviators, just give them an idea. Jamming. The jamming involves blocking GPS satellite signals, leading to a loss of position and time data. Why would that happen? Because there's a war going on. So they basically just shut access to the GPS system off. Then spoofing, this is more insidious, injecting fake GPS signals to trick receivers into reporting erroneous locations. And that's a more dangerous one, because you think you're somewhere else where you're not. And if you take into account the whole decision-making process, and maybe you're not flying for one of these, because bearing in mind, it's one thing talking about crews from Emirates and Qatar, but there's also a couple of guys flying maybe a legacy across the country with across the continent without much backup and support. And where do they go?
Exactly.
And they also maybe don't have as much fuel to mess around with to make that decision. And so you got to think quick.
Yeah.
And if you throw in just this, like, oh yeah, by the way, there's also a GPS issue. Oh, by the way, you might not be where you think you are. Yeah, then it becomes a bit more complex. And that's why I suppose today's show is more about big respect to all the pilots, all the crew, and all the ATCs around the world that just dealt with this thing as if it was just part of their daily job. Where, in fact, it's actually pretty complex. And I hope everyone gave their crew a round of applause when they landed wherever they did safely and didn't moan too much about the fact that they weren't where they were hoping to be.
Or at the very least, I would have hoped that you would drop an extra 20 in the tip jar for them because, it's an element of the profession, not only in the flight deck, but like you say, for the ground-based crew, the ATCs and the engineers and the staff all around involved in all the sectors. You
talk about the ground-based stuff. I mean, the ground-based people, imagine the chaos that they have to deal with now. All these people and trying to,
you want to talk about the decision-making aspect, guys. The decisions that need to be made up in the air, the decisions that need to be made on the ground, and the whole matrix around that.
Does AI make that decision now?
AI wouldn't be able to keep up with that
complexity
just yet, I'm sure. Interesting question. How would AI solve those problems right now? I think that's one of the situations where.
Well, put it this way: after this event, they've now got the data to possibly help with those things in the future. But you're right. It's not just pilots and crew, and it's people on the ground. The whole system, the whole sort of living organism that, and it is still amazing. It is still amazing that you can buy yourself a ticket online, rock up at the airport, chuck your bag on a conveyor belt, go fly somewhere, and your bag pops up on the other side, and off you go. It is such a complex machine, the whole aviation industry. And when something like this pops up as a sort of spoke, a stick in your spokes, that the whole thing doesn't just fall apart, that there are clever enough people and complex enough systems and crew that are trained enough in this area to be able to just deal with it. And basically, like we're saying, when was this? Monday, Tuesday, whatever?
Yeah.
Now being a few days later, and it's almost out of the news. It's a non-event and things are carrying on. It is pretty amazing. Just want to give you some stats here that you might not be aware of as well. So these spoofing events year over year, they're affecting over 1,500 flights per day during intense periods per day. Over 162,000 GPS signal loss incidents were reported between 2022 and 2023. Cybernav threats have led to a Ryanair flight that diverted 400 kilometers from Vilnius to Warsaw due to a GPS anomaly. There's a whole thing written up about that one. Actually, it'll be quite a nice one to report on at some other point. It affects the marine side of things as well. So there was a maritime collision near the Gulf. Front Eagle tanker collided after receiving false signals due to some jamming. So it's not just airlines. It's an invisible electronic warfare touching now civil airspace and big parts of civil airspace, and not just battlefields. So now you have airlines having to deal with one, come fly with us and we'll take you somewhere. But by the way, that fancy A350, it doesn't have a GPS. It seems pretty crazy. But so it's a major part of operating an aircraft safely these days. The crews are dealing with it. It's almost like a non-event. I think Andrew Evans sent us something a while ago, how they were dealing with it when he was with Cathay. And it is a non-event, but it's also a non-event because of the way the crews are trained and how they They know how to handle these things. They turn it into a non-event. However,
they've got a procedure to follow to deal with it.
Yeah.
So it's a known thing. Follow the procedure then when you face it. It's
exactly that. But what's next? We don't know. Short term, obviously, we could have the same situation tomorrow again, where that airspace is closed.
Yeah.
It could happen. Could be happening right now while we're talking about it. So it's extremely volatile. What do you do if you're not traveling? Do you cancel your trip? I don't think so. This is probably not going to be sorted out overnight. So there's no point in being too doom and gloom about it. You still going to travel.
That's the thing. I mean, that was our initial sort of concern. Was like, oh shucks, how's this gonna influence the tourism sector again? No, is it going to stop people from traveling? Because we don't need that. We certainly don't want that right now. So
any form of uncertainty in anything is not good.
No.
You just want things, and when you're traveling,
it's sorry to interrupt, but I mean, you in this phase now where you think, shit, we've just recovered nicely from that whole Rona hoax. Things are going okay. Don't need any more shit.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's uncertainty is not good. But what's funny is you going on holiday and you open up your weather app. Oh, geez, man, it's raining on my third day of holiday. This sucks, And then that one thing, if you want to feel better about things, you must always think about how much worse things could be. And I suppose waiting to go on holiday and hearing a war's broken out and you might not be able to fly to your destination is about as bad as it could get. But yeah, let's hope that there is a ceasefire that lasts for a long while. And I think end off on that topic and just say kudos, well done to everyone that was involved with getting those aircraft on the ground safely. We've had a bad couple of weeks for aviation, a horrendous event the other day that happened in India, and well done everyone that kept the show on the road this week.
Yeah, it's really nice to actually talk about things with a bit of a positive outcome, and almost has like a good news element to it, for lack of better words.
It is a positive outcome, but you will not see it being praised on the news at all. You will not. It'll just be that is just part of their job, and it is. But it has a major effect. It has a major effect on everything because, your family were expecting you home and you're now not there. And these repercussions that we spoke about at the beginning, they're going to carry on for a while. So there is a big effect. That's why I think it's cool that we made it about the crew and everyone involved. So well done. Upcoming events, pal. And I know you got something exciting on the go.
Yeah, I'm pretty stoked. Very excited for tomorrow. I've managed to swing an opportunity to take my kids on an airplane ride for the first time.
Airplane.
I almost said take my airplanes on a kid ride. I know. There's a charter flight that's come up. It's got an empty leg down to Cape Town.
Awesome.
Tomorrow, and then an empty leg back on Saturday. So we're hiking it and taking the kids for a ride.
So unless war breaks out in the Karoo, you should be okay.
Well, it's funny that you joke about the weather because we've been watching this cold front coming, and so part of our plan is to take a trip up the Table Mountain cable car on Saturday morning.
That's not going to happen.
Yeah, so we're looking at this weather, we're like, and it's ironic, we worried about the weather plans when other people are worried about dodging missiles.
Yeah.
But
that's lekker.
Quite stoked for the kids on that one, man.
Oh, that's awesome. There's from a sporting. Is there F1 this weekend?
There is F1. We're racing in Austria. Yeah, it's Spa.
Spa.
Yeah. So
always a good one. Always raining.
Yeah. And I think it's going to be an interesting one because, I mean, that's obviously Max's turf and he's got a bit of ground to claw back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that'll be good. There's also UFC. There's a hell of a good UFC fight. Ilia Topuria against Charles Oliveira. Topuria is called the Matador. A Spanish-Georgian guy, probably the best striker in the UFC, but much smaller than Oliveira. It'll be a very, very good fight. He's like the big up-and-coming. He's going to be the new big star. So, yeah, that'll be Sunday morning early. You've got nothing to do. That'll be a very, very good one.
Awesome
to watch.
Yeah, there's some exciting rugby coming up as well this weekend. In fact, the game's in Cape Town on Saturday afternoon. Springboks are playing the Barbarians.
Yeah, that's always a cool one.
Yeah, it's a nice match, that. And, so hopefully they have good weather for that game. And then there's big rugby next weekend as well. So,
yeah, rugby season is kicking off.
I love that because that's synonymous with a braai.
Yeah, Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening.
Couple of cold beers marching out the fridge.
It is nice to have a sporting event on a Saturday afternoon.
Love it.
Hey? It is awesome.
Yeah.
I think that's why football's so popular around the world as well, particularly in the UK, because there's always something to watch on a Saturday afternoon. There's no one else has the remote to the TV.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the only time of the week.
Yeah, there's no Cocomelon on the TV.
No. So, yeah, sporting weekend is always good. And a wonderful response from the show last week. So thank you so much for everyone that did comment on our 15,000 subscribers. We're happy to report we've now gone sort of over that. We're already past the 16,000. So it was a very cool episode to do. It was a nice celebratory episode for us. First time we've celebrated because of an actual achievement as opposed to just hitting an episode number. So it was a really, really cool episode. But the best part about it was just the engagement from everyone else. And also that, hey, guys, well done. I've been listening. And you kind of you forget that, a lot of people do listen and they might not always comment on that, but it was nice that so many people shot us a message and commented on that, and really appreciate that. And help us get the word across even more, please. If you're paying any attention, you may have even noticed yourself on YouTube that the algorithm is changing a little bit there. And the creators need a bit of guidance, a little bit of help to get the show out there a bit more. So if you do enjoy the show and you are watching it every week, make sure you are subscribed. You may not be, because the algorithm is so sharp that if it knows you watch the show, it's going to pop the next one up without you possibly being subscribed. So make sure you are subscribed first. And if you, do want to do us a solid, if you share that across to someone who you think might enjoy the show, it would really help.
Certainly would. And, not to discount the comments as well. The comments are a really awesome form of feedback that, us, like, I suppose most people in business rely on. That feedback loop, just to know, are we on the right track or not? But, awesome show, guys.
Enjoy Cape Town.
Thanks, pal. Will do. Looking forward to it.
Take your North Face jacket.
I'm going to. Yeah.
Bye for now, everyone.
Ciao.